we have another emergency stream in action. So, Keir Starmer sacked Peter Mandelson this morning. Let us just go over how it's been reported on the news. So, well, actually, I mean, we'll just remember yesterday. There's a few things to go over, really. Yesterday, of course, in PMQs, Kemi Badenoch asked repeatedly about Peter Mandelson. I actually said in the video yesterday, is she going to get value from this? If he ended up being sacked, then yes, she would get value. Well, he's ended up being sacked less than 24 hours later, so she's going to get good value out of this. And she's going to get a lot of value out of it, because if you think about the way it's going. So, 2 weeks ago, Keir Starmer says, oh, we're entering phase 2 of this government, right? Basically, I mean, okay, there are phases. Obviously, there are phases to the government. But the reason he said it wasn't because it's a phase 2. It's because he's saying, let's draw a line under what's happened. And now we're going to start to get the more positive momentum going, which they absolutely still can with if they lean into the Employment Rights Bill and Renters' Rights Bill, as I keep saying. But you know, what happened straight away after that? Then you've got the thing about Angela Rayner stamp duty. Now, about a week and a half ago, there isn't really anything in it, because the right-wing press have been pushing Rayner on all sorts of things, whatever they can get on her. They absolutely hate her, right? You know, intelligent working-class woman. They're not having it. But they keep falling flat. They keep trying to poke her any other sort of dealings with housing. They can't get anything. Can't get anything. Then they find some, quite by accident, because you've got to remember with the Angela Rayner thing, they even at the weekend, the weekend before last, when they were first breaking it, it was like, even then they had to say she hadn't done anything wrong. They were just, you know, doing a lot of, you know, their usual stuff. And then all of a sudden it turned out she had done something wrong. Last week's PMQs, Starmer's backing Rayner, which at the time was the right thing to do. Then the ethics report comes out and she has to resign. So this is now 2 PMQs in a row where where the Tories have said this person should go. Keir Starmer said, I'm backing them. And then a day or two later, in this case a day later, they're gone. Now, I will just point out with the Peter Mandelson thing. So first of all, why has he been sacked? It's to do with revelations that are not known. So it's not about anything that's known at the moment between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. Basically, Peter Mandelson has said, yeah, there's more shit to come out here, right? And Starmer's gone, right, okay, yeah, we're going to have to stop this now. So it was always the case, by the way. I mean, Peter Mandelson, obviously, he's he's not particularly well liked through different sections of Labour. Now, obviously, for the anti-Semites, it's just because he's Jewish. But even for others, it is dodgy. He's like a dodgy used car salesman. That's the problem. How much did Starmer know? We may never. How much do we know? Like, we don't know what's lurking. In terms of what we do know, like, Peter Mandelson hasn't done anything wrong in terms of what we know, right? It may be that he hasn't done anything wrong at all. It may be that he has explained. So Peter Mandelson yesterday was alluding to the fact his relationship with Epstein ran deeper than we know. And Starmer's now obviously decided that politically is too hot to handle. Now, is it the case that Peter Mandelson has acted improperly? Or is it just that the heat is already the temperature's already really high on this? And further revelations, even if there's nothing really wrong with them other than guilt by association, would just be too much. So have they just decided to cut him off now? But there we go. He stayed a week there at the Island of Joy. Did he, though? But there we go. Say, Mandy's always been a wrong un. He has, in a sense, yes. He is a dodgy character. That's the best way of putting it. The problem is, of course, because you'll think to yourself, why did Starmer ever appoint him in the first place? I will tell you, just to remind you, I don't criticise his appointment, even, obviously, I suppose in hindsight. I don't know in hindsight. I'm on the fence in hindsight. because obviously it's damaging to now sack him. I'll tell you what, if I was going to criticise Starmer for anything relating to this, it's the fact that he didn't get on top of this quicker. Because he shouldn't have gone through PMQs yesterday defending him only to sack him the next day. They should have made sure, as soon as it was clear that people were starting to link Mandelson with Epstein. And Mandelson himself conducted an interview yesterday where he said, yeah, there's stuff that you don't know about, right? At that point, Starmer really needed to get on top of this. And the thing is, one thing about Starmer, and it's not always a bad thing, is he's not quick on stuff like this. Now, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing in that sometimes you have to be quick and decisive. It can be a good thing because then you can say that you're not making rash decisions, but something like this was, there we go. Is it cold up north at the moment? It is quite cold, yeah. But in terms of just explain, so again, if you're wondering why did they ever hire him in the first place, I will tell you, because I think the hiring Mandelson in the first place was absolutely justifiable. Starmer needs to go. No, Starmer doesn't need to go. That would be insane for Labour. And something like this, the problem at the moment for him is not the fact that he's had to sack Mandelson at all. That's not an issue because they're saying it's to do with new information that they didn't know about at the time, right? Okay, so that's not an issue. The issue at the moment is it's the avalanche effect, isn't it? It's the snowball effect. It's the fact that he says he's starting this phase 2, then Bosch, Rayner, then Bosch, Mandelson. So that's why it's a problem. It's the confluence of things happening. But anyway, in terms of why they appointed him in the first place, try and remember where Starmer was last autumn, right? In terms of with Trump. Because remember, I'm seeing the BBC describing Mandelson as a senior member of the government. Mandelson was not a member of the government. I mean, he was in the last Labour government. But in terms of Starmer's government, he's never been a member of Starmer's government. He's an ambassador. The only reason he's been treated as more than an ambassador in the media is because Mandelson, of course, was a senior member of a previous government and he is a political beast. He's not a career diplomat, even though he is a good diplomat, right? But think about where Starmer was last autumn. Donald Trump has just been elected president. He didn't get made president until January, but he was elected president, right? So what does Starmer do? He needs good relationships with Trump, right? Now, think about what Trump's attitude towards Starmer is at this point. First of all, obviously, Trump is not at all aligned with Labour politics. Should we just make that clear? Secondly, Trump was royally pissed off about Labour staffers who were using their holiday time. They weren't doing it on behalf of Labour, but nonetheless, Labour staffers, as they do, went to America during the election to campaign for Kamala Harris, right? Yeah? Trump was vocally pissed off about that. So he was already pissed off with Starmer. Then you've got Elon Musk. Audio clipping saturate too much gain somewhere. Okay, I'll turn the gain down. I have a fancier thing now. I can actually turn the gain down. Hold on. Tell me if that's better. Sorry, it may be because I'm shouting a bit. So Trump's pissed off with Starmer because of the Labour staffers campaigning for him, plus the fact his politics doesn't naturally align. Elon Musk, who, remember, at that time was very close to Trump, arguably one of the closest people to Trump, Elon Musk had already been picking a fight, right? With Starmer. So basically, the Trump and the group around him, it was not an easy thing for Starmer to get through that, right? So Starmer needed someone who could get in with the Trump circle. And to be honest, Peter Mandelson is the obvious choice. I mean, I said at the time, I said at the time he was appointed. I said it was high risk. Of course it's high risk. Mandelson, he was sacked multiple times from the last Labour government. He kept coming back. And the reason he kept coming back is because he is dodgy, but he's also incredibly competent, like incredibly competent, seriously skilled at working with people. So I don't criticise the appointment, you know, and I would also say last autumn, so it was known that he had a close association with Epstein at the time, yeah? That's not new. At the time, would you have thought that the Epstein files would become a big political issue in the UK? You didn't even think it would become, because at the time, like Trump was promising to release them anyway. Everyone just thought he was actually going to release them. And then that would be that. But anyway. Will they're saying, Jesus Wetfield, yes, he was an advisor. It was known long before he was appointed. Yes, they should ditch Starmer as he represents everything bad about the party. No, he doesn't. I don't buy that at all. Not at all. He's promoting Labour values stronger than absolutely anyone in my lifetime. Maybe not Harold Wilson, but I was too young to remember Harold Wilson, right? But Machiavelli feels strategy, but politics is Machiavellian. I mean, it is. You know, it'd be brilliant. Wouldn't it be brilliant if all of the top political movers and shakers were all just completely 100% honest people? But shall we be honest? Is a thoroughly decent person going to get on with Trump, right, on a day-to-day? Like, Starmer just has to turn on the charm. Hello there, £5 super chat. Thank you. Says, where do I apply for his job? Well, I mean, I don't know. The Foreign Office, I guess. The Foreign Commonwealth Office. I mean, I will just point out that an absolute essential feature of the job is kissing Trump's arse. His wrinkly yellow arse. And I would warn you, his arse is known to go off unexpectedly from time to time. So would you really want the job, is what I would say. Alan, they're saying he's in a catch-22. Trump's hardly going to take it well with Ambassador getting sacked for what he shrugs off. Highly amusing, that bum-licking invite to Balmoral plus golf ball. That is another point. Yes, I was going to come to that. That's a very good point you've made. So we now do have a tricky situation. Trump has got on well with Mandelson, right? Mandelson did his job. He got in with Trump and his team. He's charmed his way into Trump's, not inner circle, but into his circle, right? Which is exactly what you need the ambassador to do. Precisely what you need the ambassador to do. So now they've got to explain to Trump why he's been sacked. Now, hopefully, they can get away with just saying the Tories were getting a bit yippy. I mean, if I was Starmer, that's the line I would probably take. I would just say to Trump, it's these Tories, you know, they're making a fuss. So just don't say it had anything to do with Epstein, for Christ's sake. Just say, it's the Tories. They were having an ad dab. You know what they're like. You know what these weaklings are like. I would put that down. But there we go. Dame Edna Everidge for ambassador to the USA. I'm not sure Maggie get on well with drag queens. I think that's the only problem there, if I'm honest. But other than that, maybe. Say Starmer was giving Mandy football manager levels of support yesterday then. Yes, basically. And that's why, I mean, I said in my video yesterday, didn't I? The best question about it didn't come from Badnut. She asked 6 different questions. Didn't really make any points. The best question was from Ed Davey. Because Ed Davey asked the real question, didn't he? He said, have you checked that there are no more revelations, right? Basically, Ed Davey is saying, because again, Peter Mandelson, in terms of his relationship with Epstein, right, people might not like it, but he hasn't done anything wrong, right? There's no evidence he was involved in Epstein's criminal activities. His business arrangements are all above board as far as anyone can tell. This is really guilt by association. And I don't like guilt by association, I have to say. I never use it myself. You know, I never use it in my own videos. I never say this person is dodgy because of their association with it. Like even yesterday when I'm talking, or not yesterday, day before maybe, when I'm talking about the fact that Tommy Robinson has covered for paedophiles, I didn't say Tommy Robinson's a wrong un because some of his associates have been outed as paedophiles, specifically for covering for them, right? I don't do guilt by just purely by association. But at the same time, I wonder if Phil has full confidence in Starmer. I've never had full confidence in Starmer, but I do say he should not, I openly say, and I will keep saying, he should not at all be standing down. And I would like someone to explain to me why he should. Because just as, so Peter Mandelson, for example, right? So there are people, like there's people in Labour who don't like Peter Mandelson because he is dodgy, right? And people don't like the idea of dodgy people representing them. That's understandable. There are other people who go, look, he's just too high risk. He's never far away from a scandal. He's just too much of a scandal magnet. That's fair enough. But there are some people who don't like him purely because he's Jewish. There are some people who don't like Starmer because his wife is Jewish. It's really that simple. But in terms of why some people think Starmer should go, I would ask, so he has managed to lead Labour from nowhere to a big Labour majority. He has put in place a massive workers' employment rights bill. Workers' rights are massively... The idea that any other Labour leader would have been able to do this is for the birds, because why didn't it happen under the last Labour government or the government before, right? Why? This is the third Labour government of my life. I've never seen anything like this in terms of the employment rights bill. Then you've got the renters' rights bill. Then you've got the community healthcare thing. That's not just putting more money into the NHS and healthcare. That's actually fundamentally bringing the NHS to communities, right? This is not as big as the formation of the NHS, but it's still a pretty big thing going on. And you look at various other things that's going on, and I'm thinking, why are people opposed to this? I can understand people who are just reading the headlines going, oh, Labour are not doing very well. But if you like looking at it a bit more deeply and you're looking at what Labour are doing, I don't understand how people who are on the left, anyway, I can understand how people on the right don't like it, but I can't understand why people on the left don't like it. I know we don't like, or many of us don't like, their social conservatism, particularly when it's unstrategic. But there we go. Emma saying, come on, Phil, he sent a photo of the island with yum yum written underneath. He's gay. Mandelson's gay. There was nothing on that island for him. You know, Mandelson, if he was going to engage in anything like that, would have been going to the Chippendale show, not Nonce Island. I'd personally rather believe Starmer sacked Mandelson because of Davies' single question rather than 6 Badenochs. Yeah, I mean, it won't have had anything to do with Badenoch as such, other than the fact that she brought up 6 questions made it more newsworthy, maybe. But again, I mean, where Starmer's definitely messed up here, I don't think he messed up in the appointment of Mandelson, because he couldn't have known it was going to become a political hot potato. I just say, if you think about the context in terms of Starmer last autumn, he had to get in good with Trump, right? There's really no question about it. You cannot abandon a relationship with the US president at any time. But when you have the additional context of Ukraine to factor in as well as Gaza, even though we've not really managed to get Trump to do anything useful with Gaza, other than say a few things. In the wider context, there was no question that we couldn't have a close relationship with the White House. And how do you do it? So I don't criticise the appointment. But I do criticise the fact that when the political heat rose this week, like Starmer yesterday in PMQ, he should have had it sorted before PMQs. Really. They needed to decide to themselves, either we can weather this storm or we can't. He really made a mistake going into PMQs, not knowing. thingy there going, how do I know? Have I been to the island, Phil? No, but it's never been reported that they hide the Chippendales to serve drinks there. Not Spencer, $5, thank you. It says, Phil, I have my ear to the ground on Australia Labour politics, not so much UK Labour. Seems like the prescription of PA as a terror organisation is a colossal error. It's certainly not been helpful. Yeah, I mean, what they like. I mean, I said at the time, technically, it's like it seems to be legal. Obviously, we have to wait for the High Court to decide on that, and. And I said at the time, I have no sympathy for Palestine Action. They've got nothing to do with Palestine, by the way. That's just a name. That's like Democratic People's Republic of Korea, right, for North Korea. They're cynically using the name for their own political purposes. They're sacrificing Palestinians, actually, because they're actively diverting money away from charities helping Palestinians to themselves. But at the same time, it's an utterly ridiculous situation that we have police having to arrest hundreds of people at a time for what they're doing. They're not doing anything violent. They're not causing any criminal damage. It is. So yes, it is a colossal error. Would it have been? They did have to stop them damaging. You can't just allow people to wander into RAF bases and damage planes. I get that. But, could they have just maybe tighten the guidance so that if you make a specific criminal offence for damaging military property, 10 years in prison or something, could they have done that? That would still have been criticised as authoritarian, but it would have at least meant you were only arresting people who are actually causing serious criminal damage. So yeah, it is. There have been too many political cock-ups. There are too many political cock-ups going on. And if people are going, well, isn't that a reason to get rid of Starmer? To that, I will say, you won't stop them with someone else. What you will do, if you get rid of Starmer at this point, I mean, I'm not saying he should be here for 10 years, but if you get rid of him at this point, all you do is you derail the project completely. Whoever replaces has to carry on doing the same things as he does anyway. And you don't necessarily change even the advisors. So you end up with someone who has less of a mandate to lead. Because remember, when you change the Prime Minister mid-term, then they don't have the same public mandate. So a replacement for Starmer can't really change direction very easily. But there you go. And then we've got saying a genocidist Saxon ambassador. Again, where's this nonsense from? Starmer prosecutes people who commit genocide. He's done it before he entered Parliament. He's doing it now. The UK government is prosecuting Israel in the International Court. That's on Starmer's orders, right? I'll tell you the people who are genocidists. It's the ones who had nothing to say when Russia was phosphor bombing Syrians. It's the ones who've got nothing to say about Darfur now. It's the ones who've got nothing to say about Putin and what he's doing in Ukraine. It's the ones who've got nothing to say about what's going on in Xinjiang in China. Those are the genocidists, mate. Which one are you on? Which side are you on? Say Labour will never form another majority government, firm prediction. Well, it may be that no one ever forms a majority government again. Because, that's, by the way, that's certainly not definite, but, you could say that. Because the fragmentation of the vote may now mean that with first past the post, you cannot get a majority government. And therefore, we may be forced to change it to a more representative system, at which point, then it becomes really difficult to get a majority government. But there you go. Prescribing them as terrorists, giving them huge validity. Arguably, yes. Just do what Trump and Farage do. Deny everything, obfuscate and pivot about what you're doing right. Don't know the way they have to be defensive and sit in the shame all the time. Because of the media, Trump and Farage have, even if not all sections of the media, some sections of the media who will back them. And of course, the far right have a well-established... Because remember, a lot of people these days don't trust what's sometimes called legacy media, but I call mainstream media. They don't really trust it. So people are increasingly using social media. The far right are much more organised on social media. They've not only been organising on social media, they saw the potential for social media in the early days of social media. The far right have seen the potential for social media a long time ago. So they're already further ahead of progressives. But I would also say that progressives are still not taking social media seriously. I don't just mean Labour Party. I don't mean political parties in general. I mean progressive groups in general are still not taking social media seriously. So basically the far right started the race first and they're still going faster. So so even though when I say Labour comms is terrible, and it's objectively terrible, there is a sense in which even if it weren't, they would still be behind in terms of the comms game, because the Labour Party cannot possibly take on the whole of the far right with all their money and infrastructure that's already been built up. Am I going to talk about the assassination of Charlie Kirk? Yes, that is my 1 o'clock video. If you want a preview, it is essentially this. There's two ways to look at it. You can either get tribal about it, in which case that doesn't actually help anyone, or you can agree that all political violence should be condemned. And I'm certainly going to say that I don't see how anyone can see anything good about a man being shot dead in front of his young children, is what I would say about that. Anyway, back onto this one. James there, the sacking of Mandelson is a small sacrifice, at least Rachel Reeves is safe. Rachel Reeves is doing a really good job on the economy. Like, if you need, we needed to get our finances in order. Yes, exactly. If you look at the mainstream media and stories on Rachel Reeves, it's one thing. If you look at the financial media, the economically literate media, very different. Very different. There we go. Far too many cynics need permanent chaos and turmoil. Yes, they don't want stable, boring politics, hence the calls for Starmer to go. The thing is, Starmer needs to lean into that a bit more. Like, I don't think he shouldn't employ the tactics of populism, but that doesn't stop you being in your face. Like, populism is literally when you say to everyone, look at that enemy over there. Join me in attacking that enemy over there. That's populism. I don't want that. Even though Labour are leaning into that little bit, but then picking on the wrong people. But another thing about populism is they're in your face. Starmer could do that. I see no reason not to be in your face a bit more. Be a bit objection. Like, there are people, both political figures and voters even, that Starmer is never going to win over. Just be a bit in your face with them. You know, you don't have to attack them as such, but just be a bit in your face. Give a bit back. Be a bit chirpy. Don't try and do this taking the high ground bollocks, because it doesn't work. I mean, you know, I know a few years ago we had the Michelle Obama saying, when they take the low road, we take the high road, or when they go low, we go high. Sorry, was the actual statement. I would just say these days there's no one on the high road. No one's high. Oh, if you go high, you're going to be very lonely because no one's there. Because we're becoming increasingly tribal as a society. We're not as bad as America, but we are becoming increasingly tribal. And, you know, people need to just call things out a bit more. Instead of trying to do it in like a dispassionate way, just call it out a bit more. So Labour, and I talked in the video yesterday, Labour are picking on Nigel Farage's stamp duty inconsistencies at the moment. Starmer maybe thinks he shouldn't do that because then that's like the government interfering, and there might be fears he's trying to put undue pressure on HMRC to investigate or something. I would say don't worry about that, right? Don't tell HMRC to investigate, but don't worry about accusations of it. Keir Starmer should be loudly talking about Nigel Farage's stamp duty inconsistencies, because you know what, they'll always be inconsistent. Farage cannot prove I mean, first of all, it really doesn't seem like he is innocent, but he can't prove it without publishing quite a lot of his personal financial dealings, which he's not going to do. But there we go. Say my channel gets more followers, is higher on the algorithm than the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Yeah, yes. But that's because politicians in general don't know what they're doing on social media. My channel is small. It's classed as small by YouTube standards. Because I don't want, and I know sometimes stuff I do is by its nature tribal. Yes, I pick on and ridicule people on the far right, and I don't really do it with those on the far left. I don't ever do it. So then that's me being biased. That's my bias, because I don't particularly like the extremists, the populists on the far left either. But I make a point of ridicule and pointing out the far right, and I don't really do it at the far left. But I don't like to lean into. I don't want viewers to be outraged. I'm not trying to stoke outrage, which is the easy clicks. But it's not helpful. And again, you say Charlie Kirk as the final point. I'll just say, because I've got a video out in an hour. I'll say about Charlie Kirk. Yes, this is a case of a monster eating its own children. Charlie Kirk actively tried to make Americans hate other Americans. Yes, he defended gun laws as they are. He said it's he acknowledged, as far as I know, that there are risks with having gun laws that are too liberal, but he said it's a price worth paying. He's a violent man. Well, I don't think he's ever committed an act of violence, just to be clear, but he leaned into violent rhetoric, shall we say. And you can argue all of those things, but at the end of the day, his murder isn't a blow against that. It's actually feeding it. There may now be more political violence as a result of this. Not Spencer there saying $10. With respect, was the UK supplying advanced military components to Russia during its acts of genocide? Was the RF flying recon missions for Russia? We're not doing that for Israel. Brits can have more influence over IP than Russia. Actually, no, we can't. No, we can't. But also, I will just say, we're not supplying Israel. We're literally not supplying them with anything that they're using in Gaza. Again, I know a lot of people are sort of telling lies about things like this, but it's not true. And we're not flying recon missions for them. We're flying recon missions for ourselves. We're trying to identify where hostages are. And if we find out where some hostages are, yes, we're passing that information on. But that's because if the hostages are all released, then Netanyahu has no excuse for anything. But the idea that we're helping him bomb hospitals and schools and refugee camps is an absolute nonsense, by the way. And in fact, we have less influence over Israel. Because one thing we could do, we genuinely could do, we could apply trade sanctions to Israel, yes. But we trade almost nothing with Israel. That would be something the EU would be better off doing, because the EU is their biggest trading partner. But of course, the EU is too divided on it. Far too divided on it. There are too many governments, including some like Germany and Italy, who don't approve of what Israel's doing, but they also don't want to apply economic sanctions. Whereas we buy some dates off Israel. That's it. Whereas with Russia, our economic sanctions are biting much more, because although we don't trade a lot of physical goods with Russia, in terms of financial services, we traded a lot with Russia. So actually, we have a much stronger hold over Russia than Israel, because we've got a lot of their money. You may have noticed that Medvedev was recently raging about it, wasn't he? The Russian government's been recently raging about the UK, again using interest on frozen Russian assets to give to Ukraine. They're absolutely apoplectic about it. They're now threatening to seize British assets in Russia, to which I can only say, well, I'm not sure we should actually have any British assets in Russia, so go ahead. But there we go. Right, well, we'll leave that there. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. And until next time, I'll see you later.